So I got some messages the last couple weeks after my last video asking me how I was doing, and so I just wanted to provide a little update. And I wanted to share something that I kind of discovered about myself over the last few weeks. And oh my, I'm looking bad. Anyway, so I'm doing better. I'm doing a lot better. I reached out to an old high school friend, and then I got kind of connected with some other old friends that I hadn't seen in like 25 years, and uh, it's been good. But something that I discovered about myself this week was that they were saying like, "Man, you're so different than you used to be." Like I used to be kind of like the life of the party guy and more outgoing than I was, and I found myself kind of withdrawing from the group or things like that. And the issue that I discovered that I also found through some counseling as well was um, I haven't really dealt with the fact that I have um, spent a good deal of my life, about 16 years, in a cult. And uh, I left about 8 years ago or so, but I don't think I had really dealt with the kind of psychological aspects of how it affected me. And so those are kind of starting to bubble to the surface now. And, in a way, it's kind of freeing because I'm realizing what a lot of my issues are. But at the same time, it's like, oh man, I am messed up. I'm really messed up. So, um, but it's been good. It's been good that, that kind of stuff's coming to the surface. And I was able to share some of my story with my friends over the last couple of days. And, they were totally cool about it. They were like, oh well, that explains a lot, because they were trying to like get me to kind of live kind of the life of the party guy like I used to be, and I just couldn't find it in me. So it was cool that they were really understanding, uh, and it was also good for me to share that, because I don't really share it with a lot of people, because it's embarrassing when you hear about people who get into a cult. Immediately your reaction is like, who would fall for something like that? And it's not so simple. So I'm going to kind of detail a little bit about how I got involved in a cult and the methods that they used to manipulate me and others. And I'm not playing a victim card or anything like that, but I just want to help explain like why I'm kind of the way I am and why I'm struggling the way I am. And eventually it's going to help me, get out of it. Um, so when I was 20 years old, I was in college. So when I was 20 years old, I was in college and I had a girlfriend, but I really didn't have any other friends, because post high school, everybody goes their separate ways, and you have kind of you kind of have to find yourself a new friend set. Well, I was kind of struggling with that, but I did run into a guy that I used to go to high school with, and from what I remember of him, he was very uh, like a skater punk kind of our groups really didn't mesh, but at the same time, I was like, I'm kind of starving for friends, so I'll go and chat him up. And to my surprise, he was a Christian, and I was not. But he invited me to his house for a Bible study, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that's kind of odd, but I want friends, so I'll go. And when I went, I found everybody there was super interested in me. I mean, everybody there was listening intently in what I had to say, and they were asking questions about what I was into, and it was exciting, initially, to be paid so much attention to, because that's what I was starving for. And week after week after week, it just seemed like that they couldn't be happier to see me. And so to a young 20-year-old, I was hooked. I was hooked on the feeling of people thinking that I was important. And slowly but surely, that kind of went away. But at the same time, slowly but surely, I was also kind of doing the same thing to other people, because you're eventually convinced that you need to show this kind of love to people too. And I agree, it's good to be interested in people and be genuine with people, but this was love bombing. Like, this had an intent to get them into the fold of this church. When you're in a cult, when you think about being in a cult, like, you think of like things like, Jim Jones, or, those kind of spaceship cult weirdos that, think the world was going to end. But it's not like that. It's subtle. It's super subtle. And you end up believing it because it just makes so much sense after a while, because it's just, the subtleness is hammered day after day after day after day after day. And I eventually became a guy who went to 3-4 Bible studies a week. I didn't hang out with my family anymore because it conflicted with the Bible studies. I became a guy who would disregard other people's viewpoints and opinions because they didn't jive with the church, including other churches. I became a guy who justified being isolated from the outside world because it was evil and it was only going to harm me. So they didn't beat you over the head with it like you may think. It's super subtle, it's super crafty, it's super believable, and it's manipulative. And so for the longest time, at least when I left the church, I just felt shame that I would fall for something like that. I felt stupid, and that was only compounded by the fact that in this church there was just this overwhelming sense of self-hatred. Like, the only thing good is God, and everything else sucks, including you. And you end up believing that because it's backed by scripture. It's backed by, look at this person. Look how blessed they are. Or not, not monetarily necessarily, but, by the sphere of influence that they had. And that looks really attractive, to be a leader of men. And I dropped out of college. I lived in a house filled with other guys who were young and thought the same thing I did. And I bought into it 100%. And so when you get out, there's a certain stigma of telling people that you were in a cult, and being attacked by former members, like verbally, that because you're not in anymore, you're not really following God, or that you've walked away is a term they like to use. And it's a shame tactic. And this particular church is a large church. It's a very large church, and it's not. They meet in big buildings, but primarily their focus is on the smaller home groups, like the first one I went to, and even smaller than that, they break down into smaller men's or women's groups, and even smaller than that is they have what they call discipling, where you go one-on-one and you teach another person about the Bible, but in reality, you're just indoctrinating them further into the cult. So, and this church is still around. They still operate. They're still very large. They still have a large influence on young people, especially. And I'm grateful that I'm out, and I'm grateful that I'm sharing my story without shame, because it's nothing to be ashamed about. Because as a 20-year-old man, I was thirsting for friendships like we all do. And I just happened to find them in the wrong places. when I got out, I was 36. So I spent about 16 years in there. I was married to a girl in the church, and we both got out. But we decided after a couple years after we left the church that it just wasn't meant to be. So, and we had 2 children, and thank God they didn't really experience what we did. But I lost all my friends in an instant. I had, when I left, I must have had, 50 guys I could call and hang out with. And now instantly I had 0. And like I said, I was 36 years old, and my youth had been stolen from me. And I never really dealt with it. I never dealt with it in a healthy way. Immediately, I started going to another church, thinking that I was going to find something, better there. But the pain was too fresh. The organization was too similar. It wasn't a cult. It was more of a traditional church. But to me, the organization just seemed too familiar. And then we went to a traditional church, and even then, I couldn't get on with it. So it damaged me in ways that I hadn't really realized. And now I'm 45. Like I said, I'm 9 years out, and I'm just now coming to terms with how it's affected me psychologically, how I look at things, how I feel about things, how I think I should feel about things immediately off the jump, how I tend to disregard things because my brain's wired in such a way to immediately dismiss or disregard a person or people because it's different than my experience. And hanging out with these old friends, they're doing their best to try to cheer me up. They're trying to. We went to a festival last week, and they're pointing out girls like, "Hey, what about her? What about her?" And I'm like, "I am not ready, dude. Like, I'm not ready at all." Because I want to be the best version of myself. In case I meet somebody, at least be the person that's worth dating. And to do that, I had to deal with this, and I'm going to deal with it head on. I did start counseling. I saw a psychiatrist as well, and I'm taking steps. I'm taking steps to make myself better, and that's important, especially for guys. There is a stigma not only with joining a cult, but there's a stigma with guys self-improving. You're not self-improving not only in the weight room or educationally or in terms of what they can provide, but what they can do for themselves in their own minds. So I would encourage people to share their experiences, no matter how embarrassing they are, to a group of friends or to a friend, and you'd be surprised how little stigma there actually is when it's a one-on-one or one-on-two situation with someone who actually cares about your well-being. My new friends or old friends, we don't share a lot of the same values. We don't share a lot of the same experiences, but what we do share is a common interest in our own masculinity, and not toxic masculinity. I'm talking about real masculinity, to kind of stoke the flames of what it is to be a real man, to provide and to protect and to cultivate the meaning of what it is to be a real man. Those are the kinds of friends you need. The guys who want your best interest. The guys who want to see you succeed. The guys who want to help you succeed. And if you have a friend like that, you're lucky. And if you don't have a friend like that, they're out there. They're out there. And chances are you may already know them. But we're too scared to talk about that kind of stuff with one another because we feel like we can't. You can. And when you do, it's almost like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, because what you're believing, kind of like what I was believing in that cult, that was untrue about myself and about others. It's untrue about us men, that we can talk to one another about what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're frustrated with, what we're happy about, what we're excited about. If we have an interest that's odd, share it with your buddy. Chances are he's going to think that's cool. I asked my a friend of mine the other day, a guy I've been hanging out with off and on for the last 6 months or so. I say, hey, what's something weird about you that you like? And he hemmed and hawed. He's like, I don't know if I can tell you. I'm like, no, tell me. I swear I will not judge you. And he's like, I love origami. I was like, I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome that you love origami. It's something that relaxes you. It's something that's fun. It's creative. You know, it probably is an escape for you. That's awesome. And you shouldn't be embarrassed to be able to share that. So, you know, share that with one another. Share stuff that moves you. Share stuff that you're interested in. And you'd be surprised, I think, how much support you actually get. And only then, these communities are going to build stronger, and we can be there for one another. Emotionally, physically, I helped build a chicken coop for a friend the other day. And emotionally, I think I already said emotionally. Well, emotions are a big part. We don't let them rule us, but we have them. And we can bounce our emotions off some people and say, you know, am I being crazy here? No, you're not being crazy. That would piss me off too. But yeah, so that's my experience in Occult 9. There's a lot more to dive in, but I don't want to dive in here. That's not the purpose of this channel. But just to give a little update of how I've been and how I'm doing and how I'm dealing with my depression and anxiety and my feelings of worthlessness. You can fight these feelings. You can defeat these thoughts. You can get better. All right, guys, I will be back with a video, a more traditional video, probably in a week or two, maybe, if things go well. But if not, just keep your eyes peeled on this channel, and I will upload sooner than later, maybe, hopefully. Yeah, I will. All right, guys, see ya.